New at 10, the Portage County Humane Society is investigating the death of 200 cows. The cattle were discovered at a field on 4th Avenue in the town of Stockton. The owner had been working with a veterinarian. It's believed the animals died of a virus that can cause respiratory and reproductive problems. Samples from the dead animals have been sent to Madison for testing. Investigators say there is no threat to people or other animals.
The cotton of our women's tampons and whatnot. So I did some Googling, and 88% of the cotton grown in America is genetically engineered. We also mentioned that he visited a village in India. I think it's pronounced Andhra Pradesh. And for 7 or 8 years, the buffalo were allowed to graze on the cotton plant after the cotton had been harvested. However, for the first time, the farmer had allowed his buffalo to graze on the BT cotton, and all 13 died. All 13 of his buffalo died the next day. Now, these buffalo only grazed for 1 day, and the first day after, they were unconscious, vets couldn't do anything, and then the next day they all died. This is BT cotton. 88% of the cotton grown in America is BT cotton. Now, what do you think our tampons, our bandages are made of?
The Director General of Investigation and Registration has indicted Mahiko Monsanto and found it guilty of illegal practices in the BT cotton case filed against the company by the All India Kisan Sabha and Andhra Pradesh Roitu Sangam before the MRTPC. It's come to our notice that in several villages animals are falling sick after grazing on BT cotton fields after harvesting. However, because BT cotton is being grown in large tracts and because of a yet unidentified toxic material in these plants, it has come to our notice that animals which are grazing in these fields are exhibiting symptoms like shivers, convulsions, running nose, bloated belly, bloody diarrhea, etc., and are dying. Therefore, we appeal to farmers not to graze their animals in BT cotton fields. We request farmer brothers to please do approach the nearest veterinary doctor and get treatment if any animal has grazed on such fields accidentally.
Top U.S. official murdered after Arkansas weapons test causes mass death. A shocking report prepared for Prime Minister Putin by the Foreign Military Intelligence Directorate GRU states that one of the United States' top experts in biological and chemical weapons was brutally murdered after he threatened to expose a U.S. military test of poison gas that killed hundreds of thousands of animals in Arkansas this past week. According to this report, John P. Wheeler III, Special Assistant to the Secretary of the Air Force, Washington, D.C., from 2005 to 2008, when he became the Special Assistant to the Acting Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Installations, Logistics and Environment, was found brutally murdered and dumped in a landfill, and as we can read as reported by Fox News, Delaware police are investigating the apparent murder of a former Bush official who also championed the fundraising effort to build the Vietnam Veterans Memorial on the Mall in Washington, D.C. Wheeler's body was found in Wilmington on Friday. According to police, somebody initially reported that the body was dumped out of a refuse truck, which would have been coming from Newark, onto the landfill. Newark Police spokesman Lieutenant Mark Farrell told Fox News that nobody had reported Wheeler missing before he was found. The Wilmington News-Journal reported that Wheeler was last seen riding an Amtrak train from Washington to Wilmington, Del, last Tuesday. Chemtrail airplane. Wheeler's military career included writing one of the most important manuals on the effectiveness of biological and chemical weapons, which led to his being hired in 2009 as a consultant to the Mitri Corporation, whose aviation system development department, the GRU reports, is at the forefront of creating the computer command and control systems used by the U.S. Air Force in their fleet of aerial spraying planes. These aerial spraying planes, this report continues, are based at the Little Rock Air Force Base in Arkansas that over the past few months have been involved with test dispersants of poisonous gases in the Afghanistan war theater using chemical weapons stocks obtained from Iraq and held at the Pine Bluff Arsenal, also located in Arkansas. Important to note about the Pine Bluff Arsenal, which calls itself America's Arsenal, is that it is one of the world's most specialized munitions and chemical biological defense products and services bases, which Russia had previously accused of not fully reporting the chemical agents removed from Iraq between 2003 and 2008, and taken to the U.S. for testing and subsequent destruction. According to this report, the U.S. relocated from Iraq to the Pine Bluff arsenal an estimated 63,000 metric tons of the poisonous gas phosgene that is described as one of the most feared chemical weapons ever used due to its ability to literally cause the lungs and respiratory system to explode. Nearly immediately after Russia accused the U.S. this past summer of not fully destroying Iraq's phosgene poisonous gas stockpile, the Pine Bluff arsenal began an accelerated disposal program injecting it deep into the ground in central Arkansas, but which, unfortunately, since this past September, has caused over 500 minor earthquakes to occur, raising the concerns of their local population. More frightening, however, is the claim made in this report that the Americans have also begun shipping massive quantities of Iraq's phosgene poisonous gas stocks to Afghanistan, where when used they will be able to say they had nothing to do with it, and believe no one will be able to prove it either. Important to note about Iraq's phosgene poisonous gas stocks are that they are no longer able to be made by any Western country, including the United States, which makes its value as a weapon of mass destruction WMD incalculable, especially in a war situation like Afghanistan, where the enemy forces are firmly entrenched in hostile terrain. To the direct reason for Wheeler's murder, this report says, was this past week's transport of Iraqi phosgene poisonous gas aboard a U.S. Air Force KC-767 tanker aircraft from Little Rock Air Force Base en route to Afghanistan that shortly after takeoff had a critical malfunction of its aerial spring computer-directed command and control system over central Arkansas, causing the deaths of thousands of red-winged blackbirds. According to U.S. reports, an estimated 4,000 of these birds were killed outright and were quickly removed by U.S. Environmental Services workers wearing hazmat suits and gas masks. Another U.S. report states that cause of death to these thousands of birds was trauma in the breast tissue, with blood clots in the body cavity and a lot of internal bleeding, which this GRE report states is consistent with phosgene exposure. Even more chilling than this incident is this GRE report stating that it was the second accidental release of phosgene poisonous gas in as many days, as the day before. This same U.S. Air Force KC-767 tanker aircraft also had a critical malfunction, causing a release over the Arkansas River that killed over 100,000 fish. Upon Wheeler discovering what was happening with Iraq's phosgene poisonous gas stockpiles, this report continues, he traveled from his home in Delaware to Washington, D.C., where he openly confronted and threatened to expose the Pentagon and White House officials responsible. Being a Vietnam veteran who was responsible for having the famous memorial to that war erected, Wheeler was more than knowledgeable about the United States' massive chemical and biological attacks in that conflict and had vowed to not let happen again. Sadly, but all too common in the United States these days, when Wheeler threatened to go public with what was happening, he was targeted for death, and as a sign to anyone else thinking of going against the regime, had his body dumped in a garbage pit for all the world to see. Today, another great American was murdered in an effort to save his country from destruction. Sadly, his death will go barely noticed. The American people seem no longer to care as they continue to seek their solace in their propaganda media lies rather than confronting the brutal truth about the monsters they have let rule over them. For hundreds of thousands of other Americans, they have become so disassociated with what is happening to and around them, they have proclaimed May 21, 2011 as the day the world will end and are giving up everything and preparing to meet their God. The great American revolutionary leader Noah Webster once said, "Every child in America should be acquainted with his own country. He should read books that furnish him with ideas that will be useful to him in life and practice. As soon as he opens his lips, he should rehearse the history of his own country." The Americans living today have utterly failed to heed these words and have, instead, become just what their masters have always intended for them to be: imbeciles.
And low-level frequencies. I got a demonstration of it from this doctor that wrote the book, Angels Don't Play This Harp. And that's what this is about. Like you
You're
said-
telling me the government is controlling our brainwaves.
I'm telling
through
you-
What was
a
the
secret
demonstration?
program in Alaska. What did you see in the demonstration?
All right, in the demonstration, I was this Dr. Begich, whose brother's a U.S. Senator.
Go ahead.
He has a thing like HARP with a CD player with two wires that come off the flat discs. He would simply put those discs here on me, and I would plug my ears.
Yes.
And I could hear the music, but not through my ears, but out of the front of my brain.
So you're saying you heard things through your brain, but not through your ears?
Not through my ears, and that's what this thing can do.
But how does that program?
Couldn't-
So it could be a constant message.
Well,
you'd
it could be
getting,
if they shoot this stuff down over masses of people, all the masses of people could be getting these subconscious whatever into their brains where they wouldn't even know it.
Yeah.
Why
And
doesn't
yet-
Tiger Woods use that as an excuse? Say
I
that
didn't-
his
I
brain
didn't
was.
do
Like, why not? But this, what's your claim?
Well, here's the deal, too, Howard.
what does the government say this program
Okay,
is?
they call this an unclassified research center. Well, they're lying there because they wouldn't let me in. If it's unclassified, how come I can't get in?
You went there
We're
and
right at the gates, and we were denied access. We tried 4 times through the government to get in. They wouldn't let us
you
go
are
there.
a former governor.
That's
you
right.
couldn't get in.
And I'm also a former Navy SEAL with a top secret security clearance.
And you could
And
not
I
get
could
in.
not get in.
So who do you think's getting
Now, get this. HARP, guess who finances it?
in? Go ahead.
DARPA, the most secret part of the Pentagon, to the tune of $250 million a year to study what? The Northern Lights? Now, here's the conspiracy. Do you remember the tsunami that hit Indonesia?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you remember how there was no warning to it?
Right.
Yes.
Normally, there's major warnings. There's an earthquake or something that causes it. Well, when when HARP is, it's powered by 5 diesel engines the size of locomotives. Like
And you think they
locomotives.
caused the
No.
tsunami?
Well, that's one of the conspiracies is that they could have been like one
Could have been
guy.
an accident.
Yeah, they could have been testing it out, and this is the end result. And what are they going to do? Come out and say, "Oops, oops"? And this thing's scary. It's like the doctor says to me, he said, "Governor, what you have here, this is the death ray."
You know, it could be, because think about it. You know, here today I'm reading in the newspaper. You know how they tell women to go get mammograms?
Yep.
They're saying today in the newspaper it causes breast cancer, all this low-level radiation. They don't know what they're doing. If they invent these things, who the hell knows? It could have been an accident.
They're rolling the dice.
They're rolling the dice with our lives.
Yep. Well, and here's the thing about what happened in Indonesia. When they crank HARP up, you see the Northern Lights. That's how powerful. It also heats up the ionosphere. Could that be global warming?
I don't know.
Could this thing be heating it up there? And, well, here's the deal in Indonesia. There's witnesses who said right before the tsunami hit, they saw the Northern Lights.
Let me ask you something. Obama's a liberal kind
Now
of
wait
guy.
a minute.
Yeah.
In Indonesia, you can't see the Northern Lights normally.
So let me ask you this. Obama's a liberal kind of guy. You think he's the president. He must know this is going on. Wouldn't he step in and say, listen, I just learned of something?
Well, Obama's just another Democrat. You're learning that.
Well, that's true.
Didn't he run on a big thing of change?
Yes.
Well, he
Anybody
not
see
only-
any change?
No.
Not only did he run on
Okay.
the thing of change, but he said exactly what you said when he was running, that wars in Afghanistan and Iraq are increasing terrorism.
That's
yet
right.
He's escalating the war.
Well, what does that tell you?
What should his speech been the other